6:05 as we get it rolling on a Monday. Hope you had a great weekend. Thanks for kicking off your week with us here on KCMO 95.7 FM. And how about Travis Kelce's weekend? You thought you had a good weekend taking the kids to the pool, Mark. Travis Kelce was on stage with his boo in London last night. Did you see that?
Making his on-stage debut in only the way that Travis Kelce could, too.
I know. He looked like a butler up there on stage, didn't he? I don't know. He was part of some act with Taylor Swift. He was like a character in her set for one of her songs.
What I love about it is all of her exes would have wanted to do a duet with her or something like that. He's just the background guy.
That's all good. He's just the, hunk in the background carrying her off stage. I was with the two older ones yesterday at the pool, and these two women, probably about 40, are sitting at a table next to us, and they start losing their minds when their phone starts blowing up, being like, Travis is on the stage with Taylor. And Claire says to me, Dad, what are they talking about? I said, oh, well, Travis Kelce went on stage with Taylor Swift, apparently, in London. She's like, oh, can you swim now? Can you get in the pool with me? Come on now, let's go.
Riley was pretty excited to see Travis and Taylor on the stage.
Well, I'm glad. The little girls and the middle-aged women were all fired up yesterday about Travis Kelce taking the stage. I'm just waiting for the guy to score a touchdown week 1 against the Ravens, okay? That's what I'm looking for. In the meantime, I hope you had a great weekend. We know that Travis Kelce had a great weekend. Missouri Lieutenant Governor and gubernatorial candidate Mike Kehoe also had himself a very good weekend. Couple of polls dropping. We told you about one on Friday, but this one came out on Saturday showing the lieutenant governor closing the gap aggressively with Jay Ashcroft in the Missouri gubernatorial race, which is all of just a few weeks away from that primary happening in early August, of course, where we'll find out who's going to be the Republican nominee. And let's be honest, whoever's going to be the Republican nominee is going to be an overwhelming favorite to be the next governor in Missouri. And I'm not surprised by this polling at all. It shows Jay Ashcroft at 31%. It shows Mike Kehoe at 29%. Bill Eigel is at 9%, and the undecided vote in this Missouri Scout poll is 31%. So this is not surprising to me that this poll that dropped on Saturday, you're seeing a late push. Not even a late push, but just a closing push from Mike Kehoe. First off, he's got the most money in the race. His name ID is building across the state. He's done a lot of advertising in St. Louis and Springfield. Kansas City actually is Mike Kehoe's weakest market, which is why he spent the last several days here in Kansas City. So none of this is a surprise to me. And many of you may have seen him up in the Northland, across the region, Friday and really Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. He spent a lot of time up here, and that's because he knows, one, he's got to close the gap in Kansas City, and two, it's where he's weakest. So he was up here right as this poll dropped on Saturday. I got it into my hands on Saturday morning from some folks with the Kehoe camp as they were in Clay County, talking to Clay County residents about the campaign. So I'm looking at this thing, and I'm saying, okay, if you were betting this thing, like horse racing or something like that, you would be betting on Mike Kehoe because he has the most money. And he is continuing to hit the ground. His message is resonating as he hits the ground. And that's part of what he did when he was here on the show on Friday, when he talked about why he believes his campaign is starting to close the gap with Jay Ashcroft.
Well, I think that's really good news because, a year ago the Ashcroft camp was saying, the election's essentially over. His name ID is so high, there's no way Kehoe can catch him. And now, in fact, we have caught him. And the fact that there's a lot of undecided tells us that he's not making a great impression on people as he travels. So people really seem to connect with our message that number one thing we're going to do when our hand comes off the Bible, Pete, should we be elected governors, get crime under control, back men and ladies in blue, get them the resources they need, tougher sentencing on fentanyl dealers, get our communities back where we need to be. Then our economic development plan of eliminating the state's income tax. We actually have Art Laffer on our team helping us do that. We want to get that done so we have a great economic development tool. Growing our ag economy, as you and I have talked about a lot, is a big issue. It's the number one industry in Missouri. And then last but not least, education reform and how can we get good options for parents and young folks as they go through our education system.
Something Mike Kehoe said there that stood out to me is that he's happy with the undecideds being as high as they are. Now, he claims it's because people aren't thrilled with Jay Ashcroft's message when they hear him speak. I don't know about that. I mean, I've seen Jay Ashcroft speak in dozens of settings, and he's pretty well received. But it is telling that when a guy with the last name Ashcroft in the state of Missouri is not, according to these polls at least, and you take them with a grain of salt because, in fairness, this poll was done by Remington Research, which is owned by Axiom Strategies, which is advising and working with the Kehoe campaign. So I like to be completely transparent about that. You can make polls say what they want. I think we all understand that, but still, I'm just throwing that out there. But I do believe there's a large number of voters who are undecided. Another poll came out last Friday and said the undecideds was over 40%. This one says it's over 30%. The point is, the more people I talk to here in Missouri over the last few weeks, they all believe that, they're looking at it. They don't really have a strong feeling either way about any of these candidates. So the next 5 to 6 weeks are going to matter. They're going to be hearing from them on this radio station and elsewhere. They're going to get their pitch, and they're then going to go to the polls on August 6th and decide who they want to be the Republican nominee and the likely next governor in the state of Missouri. So the undecideds being that high, you would think that if you have Jay Ashcroft's ID, last name, of course, we all know about his father, his successful career here in Missouri, then, of course, working for George W. Bush. And the fact that people are not naturally drawn in a meaningful way to that last name in this state is telling. I would think that his numbers would be in the 40s just based on that alone. And the fact that, listen, Jay has done a very good job as Secretary of State. He's had a very successful, albeit relatively short, political tenure here in the state of Missouri. There's nothing that he's done where you say to yourself, I don't know about this guy, Jay Ashcroft. This one thing that he's done as Secretary of State really has me questioning his conservative values or something like that. That doesn't exist. So as much as anything, I believe it comes down to what's the marketing plan? How are you getting your name out there? And the reality is, for a guy with the Ashcroft last name, I've been surprised when you look at some of the fundraising numbers, how little fundraising there has been. Now, the allegation by his camp is we're grassroots. We don't have the big donors and lobbyists behind us like Kehoe. And listen, we're here on behalf of the people. And that's great. I think many Missourians will appreciate that message. But in the end, money does matter. It just does. You can say it's wrong. You cannot like it, but it does matter. And unless there's some big influx in cash, if I was betting this thing down the home stretch, I'm giving Kehoe the edge over Jay Ashcroft at this point in time. And by the way, Bill Eigel at 9%, everybody else well down into the single digits in this poll. 9:13 as we get it rolling on a Monday morning on KCMO. Coming up next, Trump apparently is going to be announcing his VP pick this week ahead of debate week, which is coming up on Thursday night between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Who is it going to be? Who is the front runner? I think I got the answer after what I saw yesterday. We'll tell you about it next. This thing really is playing out like an episode of The Apprentice. Donald Trump apparently set to announce his VP pick this week. He said over the weekend to some reporters that he is basically going to have that person selected this week. He plans to have them at the debate coming up at Thursday night that's going to be on CNN against Joe Biden. So he's closing in. Theoretically, he knows who that person is going to be. He could change his mind at the 11th hour. Donald Trump's been known to do that once or twice. But it's believed the final list includes Doug Burgum, North Dakota governor, who ran for president for a cup of coffee. Marco Rubio, Little Marco, as he was dubbed back in 2016. Or J.D. Vance, the first-term U.S. Senator from Ohio, who most notably really entered the political fray with his very popular book from 2016, Hillbilly Elegy. And that launched his political career, and now he's in the U.S. Senate in Ohio. If I was handicapping the order, it would be Little Marco, Doug Burgum, J.D. Vance. But when I heard Doug Burgum over the weekend on CNN pushing back on Caitlin Collins for alleging that Donald Trump will get back into the White House and be a dictator, I thought to myself, this is the kind of guy on TV that Donald Trump needs. You know, J.D. Vance gets on TV and he tries to be Donald Trump. Vivek Ramaswamy gets on TV and tries to be Donald Trump. Doug Burgum gets on TV and is Doug Burgum. And what does that mean? That means he clearly has all the facts. He has all the information, but he does it in a style that is less in your face and less threatening than a J.D. Vance, than a Vivek Ramaswamy. And that's what Donald Trump needs. Nobody needs a VP, if you're Donald Trump, to be more in your face than Donald Trump. He's plenty in your face, right? He gets it. He makes his points very clear. Where he stands, what his beliefs are, it is right to the point. What Donald Trump may need is somebody like Doug Burgum, who basically told Caitlin Collins on CNN that she was full of it yesterday, but did it with a little bit of a twinkle in his eye, which, came off pretty good.
Well, we've got three branches of government, and this president, more like any other, has bypassed Congress because as a governor of a natural resources state and a big ag state, we're facing over 30 rules and mandates. Each one of those could be 800 pages to 1,400 pages long. None of them have come from Congress, and all of them could literally kill the industries that we have in our state, including baseload electricity, which we need to be competitive in the arms race around AI with China, who's building baseload electricity plants like 2 a month. So that's happening without Congress. And then, of course, on the student loan thing, when the Supreme Court ruled against him, then he just said, hey, we'll figure a different way to do it. So I just think that there's, again, a double standard here. He is bypassing the other two branches of government to push an ideological view, whether it's on economics or whether it's on climate extremism. He's doing that without using the other branches. And I think
you don't like his executive orders and you don't like his policies. I understand that. I don't think anyone expects the Republican governor to agree with President Biden on that. But it's not a dictatorship.
Well, I think, again, part of where this word has come from has been there's been a nonstop media attack on President Trump saying that he might use executive orders when he takes office. And I'm just was trying to make the point here that under this current administration, most of the changes that are driving inflation in our country, the stuff he's not doing on the border, which he could be doing with executive orders. I mean, the open borders and the inflation are things that he's doing by himself alone, ignoring the other branches of government.
Well,
He's right. That was Doug Burgum on CNN, just sticking it to Caitlin Collins and saying, listen, what he is doing, what Joe Biden is doing, is the stuff that you would accuse Donald Trump of being a dictator for doing. And his executive orders, whether it is on energy policy in this country, whether it's on bailing out student loan debt that not only did Congress not approve, but on top of that, was smacked down by the Supreme Court, and he's doing it anyway. I mean, my goodness. If Trump was outwardly defying the Supreme Court in this kind of way, where he was literally thumbing his nose at the Supreme Court, could you imagine the meltdowns you'd be seeing on places like Morning Joe and CNN and some of these other shows? I mean, The View, they'd have to take it off the air. They'd be cursing and the whole deal. They would be so distraught. Maybe they'd finally end up moving to Europe, too, or go somewhere else. I mean, whatever it takes, I guess. That could be a good thing if Donald Trump was to defy the Supreme Court in that kind of a manner. Don't want him to, but I'm just saying, if that's an outfall from it, not the worst thing in the world. So just going to throw that out there. But anyway, Doug Burgum laying that out in a well-thought-out, non-threatening manner is exactly the kind of sidekick that Donald Trump needs. Now, why do I think Doug Burgum might ultimately not get picked? Doug Burgum doesn't need Donald Trump. Doug Burgum is a highly successful billionaire who became governor of North Dakota, who ran for president for a minute because, I thought maybe he was bored. I don't know. But part of me thinks that Donald Trump wants somebody that he can really take all the credit for. Somebody who he can make it clear to, you are here because of me. I think Donald Trump likes having that kind of power. That's how he's lived most of his life, as a businessman and then a politician. He's enjoyed having that kind of power. He won't have that kind of power over Doug Burgum. Now, Doug Burgum brings a lot of other things to the table. He doesn't necessarily want to run for president. He's not a guy who's going to show up if they win in 2025 and start launching his own exploratory presidential campaigns. He's in his late 60s, so he's not this young, hungry politician looking to use his VP ticket to eventually become president himself. You can probably make that accusation of Marco Rubio and or J.D. Vance, and certainly Vivek Ramaswamy. But the thing that could ultimately end up holding a guy like Doug Burgum back is the fact that Trump may feel like he does not have the authority, the power over a guy like Doug Burgum that he would have over the other two. And don't kid yourself, that kind of stuff matters to Donald Trump. I think it's a personality flaw of his, but it matters to him. And I think the other idea of having a fellow billionaire businessman in the Oval Office is appealing, but also maybe, somewhat threatening in some respects. Where instead of being able to slap around a guy like Little Marco, you say to yourself, well, if a guy like Doug Burgum, who's basically his peer, he's 10 years younger than him, but he's basically his peer, who's had also a tremendous amount of success, is that something that in the end, Trump may find somewhat threatening that is a bit of a turnoff? That's the only reason I could see a guy like Doug Burgum not getting it. But I'm warming up to him more and more every day, especially the more I hear from him on TV. I'd still give the slight edge, and it's a slight one, to Marco Rubio. But as I hear this guy Burgum speak, I become more and more impressed. And if he's Donald Trump's pick this week and he's joining him at this debate on CNN at Thursday, boy, it's going to be quite a contrast between Doug Burgum and Kamala Harris, who has literally done nothing to justify her role as the vice president of the United States. Coming up on KCMO Talk Radio, we are days away from major pornography sites being banned in Kansas. I think it's great news. But of course, some people are finding a reason to complain about it. Lawmakers right here in our backyard in Kansas City. We'll tell you who and why next on KCMO 95.7. Lead story on the Kansas City Star's website this morning on a Monday, 6:35. Kansas law will restrict access to adult websites. What does this mean for residents? Well, the long and short is less people accessing porn, which, I don't know, I think should be a great thing for those of us who want to continue to improve and dig out of the societal rot that we find ourselves in. Feels like a no-brainer to me. But of course, Kansas City Star, writing about something that a Republican legislature did, can't be all good, right? There can't just be, an inherent benefit to any of this. It's got to be more than that, doesn't it? So here's what the Kansas City Star writes. A Kansas law will go into effect on Thursday that will ask online adult websites to verify the ages of each user who goes to their website within the state. The Kansas legislature passed Senate Bill 394 in April. It will go into effect in late June. The bill was approved when Kansas Governor Laura Kelly let it become law without signing it. This moderate, huh? Can't sign the bill that makes it so that, we confirm people are adults and 18 years old to go watch pornography on the internet. I'm just here to be the middle of the road lady,
Yeah, if I don't sign it, it'll be law anyway.
Yeah.
So.
Gosh, playing politics. It's such, gross. So Kansas has followed more than a dozen other states, Idaho, Indiana, Kentucky, Texas, Utah, which all require adult websites to verify visitors are adults, despite privacy concerns and the broadness of the law. In response, a few websites will opt to restrict access to visitors in these states. So here's a message that appears to users who are visiting the adult website Pornhub. This big screenshot shows up, writes the Kansas City Star. It says, "Did you know that your government wants you to give your driver's license before you can access Pornhub?" As crazy as that sounds, it's true. You'll be required to prove you're 18 years or older by uploading your government ID for every adult content website you'd like to access. Now, here's what you need to know, and here's where I guess the rubber meets the road in some respects. What websites will be defined as having content that is harmful to minors? How will the privacy of visitors be protected? Does it violate users' free speech? Well, the bill says they will verify the ages of users through a commercially available database that is regularly used by businesses or government entities for the purpose of age and identity verification, or any other commercially reasonable method of age and identity verification. That seems reasonable. I've got no problem with that. But it's not good enough for a website like Pornhub. They are removing themselves from the state. Now, they've also removed themselves from several other states: Arkansas, Montana, Mississippi, North Carolina, Texas, Utah, and Virginia. And now it will do the same in Kansas coming up on Thursday. The company said in a statement, "Until a real solution is offered, we have made the difficult decision to completely disable access to our websites in these states." Good. Don't let the door hit you in the ass on the way out, as far as I'm concerned. You know, this is a world now, especially, you know, and I speak to this as a millennial. When, you know, you go back to the boomer generation, you had to look up a magazine to see stuff like that. Then as time went on, it just became accessed on the computer. Now, forget it. With kids having phones, it's a complete disaster. I can't even fathom. Now, I know you can put restrictions on things and everything else, but still, the idea of teenage minds, especially teenage male minds, having any kind of access to that content on a moment's notice on their cell phones is as disturbing as it gets when you talk about trying to build a solid culture, which is the foundation for building a solid country, right? So I have zero problem with this, none whatsoever. And if Pornhub wants to leave the state, you know what? Screw them. No one should miss them at all. But the pushback here, writes the Kansas City Star and some local politicians, is the line in the bill that refers to the phrase harmful to minors. The statute has legal definitions of what is considered harmful, which includes acts of masturbation, homosexuality, sexual intercourse, physical contact with a person clothed or unclothed in public areas. So their concern now ties into the issue of LGBTQ. That's where many Kansas Democrats have taken this conversation. The Kansas City Star writes here, the law using the phrase homosexuality could also mean the state can require age verification to access LGBTQ content, allege some. On top of that, one lawmaker, his name is Ru Chu. He is out of Westwood here in Johnson County. He said here to the Kansas City Star, Representative Ru Chu, a Westwood Democrat, asked lawmakers on the House floor whether the bill could censor a website listing the top 10 most gay-friendly cities. I mean, come on, that's not going to happen. And if it does, I'll stand corrected, okay? But that's not going to happen. By the way, the answer to that question, the top 10 most gay-friendly cities, is wherever Mark is with his fanny pack on any given day in Kansas. All right? I mean, that's the answer to that question right there. I'm just saying.
Olathe.
Most
10, baby.
Most summer Saturdays and Sundays. That's the answer to the question, wherever Mark is with the fanny pack. But, like, come on. Now, if on Friday morning I come on the show and I Google top gay-friendly cities in Kansas, and I get a verification code on my screen here that says, sir, you must confirm you're 18 years to access this content on Google. I will stand corrected. Mea culpa, you got me. But this is the kind of fear-mongering that always gets thrown out there when there's actually decent legislation passed that throws a company like Pornhub out of the state, John.
Well, that's a variation on the banning Super Bowl 30 at the library in the search. XXX, it came up triple X for 30 in the Roman numerals. So, yeah, we get that.
Oh, boy. John's in Overland Park. Hey, John, you're on KCMO. What's happening, man?
Good morning. Hey, I've got a couple of points to make. Number one, I think it's a great idea, but in today's society, everybody tries to protect themselves, and I don't know about you, but on a VPN, you can actually select where you're coming out of according, to where the internet thinks you are. So all this is kind of irrelevant. It's a cool idea, and it comes off as a really good political thing, but with modern VPNs, it doesn't really matter. You can show that you're coming out of East Germany if you want to.
Where are you at there, John? A lot of noise coming in. Anyway, pull it down there.
I'm driving down the road. I'm in Overland Park.
Gotcha. Okay. So, John, you're suggesting that basically anybody could access these websites in the state of Kansas, regardless. But here's the thing. Why then is Pornhub pulling out of Kansas? Like that signals.
Like I said, it's a very political thing. That's a cool thing for them to do. However, it's irrelevant.
So are you saying, and I'm not an expert on this, and maybe I should find someone this week as this thing gets set to become law on Thursday, but are you suggesting then that if you live in Kansas, you can make it appear as if your computer is located in Missouri and still access these websites?
You can make yourself appear like you're in Europe.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, John, thank you, buddy. I appreciate that. Listen, I have a VPN. I think, no, I don't have a VPN. I'll log into my work computer from home via VPN. I'm not an expert on that by any stretch of the imagination. And I suppose if you really want to access pornography on your computer, and there is a way to do it through a VPN, then I guess, you know what, you're going to keep doing it. But if this results in less people, especially less young people, accessing this kind of content, even if it's not everybody, if it's a large percentage of people, I believe that's a huge win.
I've had a few friends who have accessed Royals games via VPN because they're not allowed to watch them in the Kansas City area. So they've used hey, we're in Boston, so we can watch the Royals game. So maybe it could be the same for the porn. I'm not sure.
That's that. Okay.
But to that point, we're only talking about a subset under 18, correct? I mean, if you're over 18, or I guess if you just don't want to do the ID thing, is that the deal?
No, it won't be accessed at all for anyone in Kansas.
Well, I understand Pornhub has pulled out.
Yes.
But a site could say and comply with the age thing. So now we're just talking about 18.
Yes.
So got to have a certain set of skills, I suppose, to mess with the VPN.
That's true. Yes. So we are just talking about those, to your point, John, under 18.
Well, for the freedom fighters out there. We're not limiting everyone necessarily. That was Pornhub's decision to not be, whatever the word,
compliant with the state. They don't want to be in the state. No, that's true. All right, 913-4087-957. That's the text line and the studio line here on KCMO. There's always going to be a way around laws. There is. I mean, but I don't think you don't pass quality legislation that is societally beneficial because people are still going to break the law. I don't think you do that. Because if you live with the mindset of if we pass this law, people are still going to find a way around it, then you're never going to pass anything. You're going to have a lawless society. And I understand freedom and all that stuff, but this, to me, it's not about freedom. First off, you're still going to have access to it, to John's point, with other websites if you really want that content. But this is as much about protecting kids as it is anything else, and I will give the legislature in Kansas credit for doing that. We must be inching closer towards an election or something like that because climate activists are back in full swing. Good morning. Hope you had an outstanding weekend. Thanks for joining us on KCMO Talk Radio. I know Travis Kelce was on stage with Taylor Swift last night in London. Woo! That's right. They were living it up He was on stage as like an act in one of her songs. It was kind of interesting. So good for Travis as that relationship continues to progress and move forward.
Tight end strains back at Taylor Swift concert.
Could you imagine? Oh, my goodness. He's going to miss week 1. Strained hip flexor picking her up on stage last night. Then back here in the States, there was a lot of golf on this weekend. I know last week was the U.S. Open, but they followed up with the Travelers Championship on the PGA Tour this past weekend in Cromwell, Connecticut. And then Live Golf had a huge showing down in Nashville over the weekend as well, where Bryson DeChambeau, my goodness, that guy is finally filling that void of biggest rock star in the sport. But yesterday, on the 18th green at the PGA Tour event in Connecticut, a bunch of dorks stormed the 18th green towards the end of Scottie Scheffler's round. You had a bunch of climate activists run on to the 18th green while Scottie Scheffler is standing there getting ready to putt. And here's what it sounded like. And I'm going to play this because you first off hear people start to boo. Then there's a big round of applause when one of the climate activists gets speared on the green. And then by the end, they're chanting USA at these, give or take, half a dozen losers.
I also heard an FJB in the background. Probably
you?
not on this clip, but later on.
Don't worry. The FJB is not on this clip, all right? If anything, it would be the PC version, Let's Go Brandon. But no, this is what it sounded like. Tackled! They tackled him! Yeah! Woo! USA! That's a pretty good scene yesterday at the PGA Tour event, and that's in Connecticut, by the way. In Blue, Connecticut. You got tens of thousands of people chanting USA as these climate dorks get tackled on the 18th green.
I would have thought it was at the Copa America game here. U.S. was playing last night.
Yeah, it sounded good. I was impressed by the fans there. They weren't in Connecticut. Ooh, they're
how many degrees can you get on? You say that was at a golf course.
Yeah,
in Connecticut.
Yeah,
right in Joe Biden country.
Yes, exactly. Now these guys and gals were wearing these shirts that said "No golf on a dead planet." I'm not even sure what that means. No golf on a dead planet. I don't know what they're going for, but once again, they were a combination of washed up Bernie bros, driving around in their Subarus, like, Boomerland, and then, young Gen Z weirdos is kind of how they looked. So it was a very unimpressive cast of characters as I'm looking at this thing yesterday watching the PGA Tour event. Just popped out out of nowhere. So
there's no anything
on
a dead planet, so I guess that's the deal. Right?
That's exactly right. So that was yesterday during the golf tournament. And then there was this from the Sunday shows earlier in the day. They broke out Bill Nye the Science Guy. Bill Nye. Bill Nye the Science Guy. Remember him from, at least if you're a millennial like me, you'll remember him from middle school probably, when Bill Nye was breaking out and becoming a big star across the country. Mark, were you a big Bill Nye guy back in the heyday? Probably, I would say, late 90s, mid-90s, give or take?
I loved Bill Nye, but only because the teacher was bringing out the cart with the TV on it.
It meant that you weren't doing anything in class that day.
Bam.
Yeah, you were going to get indoctrinated by Bill Nye. Although he wasn't doing this kind of nonsense back in the late 90s, to my memory at least.
My favorite Bill is Hurlbrink.
Yeah, that's right, our buddy Bill. Big bad Bill Hurlbrink on KCTV5. So Bill Nye, they break him out on ABC News yesterday with Martha Raddatz, and he's talking all about climate change and how we got to make sure we're doing our part here.
If you meet with people who don't believe in climate change, don't believe in global warming, and there are a lot of them, what do you say to them? What do you say to them to convince them?
So if I could convince people in one sitting, that would be fabulous, but that has proven quite difficult. I tell everybody.
Let me just stop right there. anyone that runs for office, like, sometimes they want to come on the show and whatnot. And I'm like, listen, if you can't give a good pitch to somebody in 90 seconds, then you're not giving them a good pitch. If you can't do that, then you failed as a candidate. Bill Nye saying there, I wish I could convince everybody in one sitting how we've got to take this climate change thing seriously. And we must all drive our electric cars and stop using oil and gas and coal. Dude, if you can't do anything like that in one sitting, then you might not have the data and you might not have the sales pitch behind you because the facts don't back you up to justify your broader point of what you're trying to convince the American people of doing. But anyway, let's continue with fake scientist Bill Nye.
It takes years where people see the evidence, and the problem we have in climate change is we don't have a 9/11 or a Pearl Harbor. It's slow motion. So everybody that
Yeah, it's a real problem. We can't just have 3,000 people die on the spot to justify my climate change baloney, said Bill Nye. If only we had a Pearl Harbor or 9/11 type moment, my life would be a lot easier. People just all drop dead at the same time and I could blame it on the climate or something.
I speak with acknowledges that the climate is changing. Just the nudge that we work on, and people on my side of this, is pointing out that humans are causing it. And we're doing it because we've created this wonderful quality of life for so many people by burning ancient carbon, ancient swamps, coal, oil, gas. We just got to stop doing that. And so there are many alternative sources of energy, but we have to work together to share it. And I'm talking about transmission lines and energy storage, as well as developing more efficient renewable sources at the same time. Better solar panels, better wind turbines, and this mythic thing that people are talking about is fusion. But it's decades away, but nevertheless, it's in the future.
Why don't these D-bags ever lead the way in terms of like putting their money where their mouth is? Pretty amazing there from Bill Nye when he says, we have this wonderful quality of life. And then he says 10 seconds later, but we got to stop doing that. We have other energy sources that we need to start sharing. I don't know where Bill Nye lives, but, based on his success as a fake scientist for little kids, my guess is he's done very well in life. I'd be curious to see how big of a hypocrite he is when it comes to his own lifestyle compared to the rest of us. Whether it's John Kerry flying private jets to climate change seminars around the world, whether it's, Barack Obama in a 10,000 square foot house on the coast of Martha's Vineyard. You can find example after example after example of the people who tell you need to start changing your quality of life to save the planet while they do anything but that, John.
Well, he might carpool. You ever seen the circus where the clowns get out? There's like 22 of them in one little deal.
Yeah, he may very well do that.
Give him credit for that.
I will give him credit there, if that's actually the case.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. If his last name was Johnson, he wouldn't be famous.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Bill Nye, the science guy. It had to rhyme. If it didn't rhyme, he wasn't going to be there.
Do we even know, is that actually his real name?
I just looked it up, and it's William Nye. So
okay. All right.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. That's okay.
That's his hook.
Oh, man.
Could be the anything guy, though, right?
Yeah, it could be the anything guy. That's true. That's
Bill
a good
Nye,
point.
the plumber guy.
Yep. 913-408-7957 as we roll to 7:15 on KCMO Talk Radio. Next hour, we're going to have Ken Coleman on the show, Ramsey personality, Scott Fawn, Missouri Times in studio at 8:30, and our buddy Chris DeGaulle at 9 o'clock on KCMO.
Bill Nye the Science Guy.
All right, Mark, you're fired. Mark, you're fired. That's done. 7:15 on Monday, June 24th. Mark, it was nice knowing you. See you later, pal. Just so you know, Mark just begged, pleaded, got on his knees, as some would say, for his job back. And we have decided over the last 5 minutes to allow Mark to continue as a member of this show. So, Mark, you're here even though you played the Bill Nye the Science Guy theme song going into the break.
Thank you.
A lot
Thank
of
you
people
for bringing me back.
You're welcome. A lot of people on the text line were worried about you. They wanted you to stay. They lobbied for you. Some people wanted your job. I will say that as well. Some people on the text line were saying they wanted to apply for your position. But we decided after some calls and some texts and some social media messages here in the last few minutes to allow Mark to continue on. And John was a big advocate for that as well. He just didn't want to do all the work for both guys. So
we had a few bettors checking in, too, that were going to miss their source.
Yeah, they wanted their parlays come football season. So, we had to keep them around for that. But don't play the Bill Nye the Science Guy theme song again, please. That's all I ask.
Deal.
All right. We're all set. So that was very good analysis by Bill O'Reilly in his morning update. To note, when you actually look at the policies of the two guys ahead of this debate coming up on Thursday, that I think is going to do a monster number, by the way. I believe this will be the most watched presidential debate, more so than the last election cycle, and probably go back to 2016 with the Trump-Hillary debates. And what's interesting is that the debates in 2020 didn't top the debates in terms of number of viewers from 2016, because then, like, Trump was this unknown, wild entity. Nobody had ever seen anything like him, and he was on the debate stage with Hillary Clinton. Come 2020, people are fatigued of Donald Trump. COVID's going on. People are just worn down in 2020. And now I think there's an element to that that's also at play. Like, we've seen this script play out before. Donald Trump, Joe Biden, we just did it 4 years ago. But a poll last week showed that 60% of Americans said they were going to watch it, which I don't know if that's actually going to come to fruition. But if that does happen, then you're looking at Super Bowl-esque numbers for this debate. Usually it's anywhere from 50, 60 million people will watch these debates. But I think that number is going to come in potentially higher than that if the polling is actually correct. But O'Reilly was right to point out that when it comes to the actual policies of these guys, if you take Donald Trump out of it, take the guy out of it, and everything that rubs people the wrong way about him, his policies are not as far right, air quotes, as people perceive them to be. They're not. I mean, even his immigration stance, right? I mean, he got a lot of crap from his right flank late last week when he suggested that we should give out green cards to foreigners who are graduating from colleges here in the United States. A lot of people to his right were like, what is he doing? What is he saying? That's not good policy. On top of the fact that also last week, this came out on immigration, half of Americans of all political affiliation, half of Americans, 51%, including 42% of Democrats, say they would support mass deportations of illegal immigrants, according to a new Axios survey by the Harris poll. 30% of Democrats and 46% of Republicans now say they'd end birthright citizenship, which is, of course, if you're born here, you're automatically an American citizen. A third of Democrats don't want that anymore. So the American electorate is changing on that issue. It's in a different place than it was even 5 or 10 years ago, because people don't like where things are at when you flood a country with 10, 11 million people and don't know who they are, what their intentions are, what their plans are. So that's what makes this wildly different from anything we've seen in recent years on that specific issue. And then I thought this was fascinating as well. I saw it over the weekend. Donald Trump's been making this big push to not tax tips. He wants to make that law if he gets back into the White House. Not taxing tips, which will help a lot of people at the working class level. So this poll was done, Fox News poll was done. And it shows here, net approval on eliminating taxes on tips, depending on Donald Trump's name inclusion in the question. So Democrats support not taxing tips by 40 points. They're plus 40 on the issue when Trump's name is not included. But if Donald Trump's name is included in the proposal, it goes from plus 40 to Democrats being minus 10 on the issue just because Donald Trump proposed it. I mean, that is case in point right there of Trump derangement syndrome. That is it in a nutshell. You like the idea. You like the legislation proposal. By a plus 40 margin, it swings 50 points the other way if somebody then tells you that, well, yeah, that's Donald Trump's idea. If you want to wrap up TDS in one question, that's it, John. That's it right there.
Well, I was going to say, you say Democrats oppose Trump's tax relief program, right?
Yeah.
Tax tip program.
Yeah, that's really it. You throw his name in there, they swing by 50 points. This appeared in the Kansas City Star over the weekend. Headline, Joe Biden just erased my student loan debt. If it's a campaign ploy, I'm all for it, writes Matt Driscoll. Piece appears here in the Kansas City Star. It's like satire, but it's so bizarre you can tell it's not satire. He writes here, very dramatically, to open up his article. The check was mysterious and unexpected, the best kind, really. It arrived in a small, nondescript envelope. Through the cellophane, or whatever those little windows are made of, my full name appeared, printed on a very official-looking piece of paper, suggesting it was either a legitimate payout or a meticulously crafted attempt to sell term life insurance. The good news, at least from where I'm standing, which will become clear in a moment if it hasn't already, it wasn't fake. There was a real check for $40 inside. Not a princely sum, mind you, but better than nothing. Best of all, a no-frill statement was attached, revealing a sender, the U.S. Department of Education.
I was reading like Ralphie out of Christmas Story where he got his decoder pin. Yes. Honors and benefits at the age of 10.
In the simplest terms, it was a refund for the 4 months of student loan payments I'd made since enrolling in Joe Biden's Saving on a Valuable Education or SAVE plan. Indirectly, it also served as a winking nod from Uncle Joe after the U.S. Supreme Court Dikembe Mutombo'd his first attempt at a student loan relief, subtly imploring me to go online and pull up my account just to see where things stand, ... which is precisely what I did. 2 decades ago, I borrowed roughly $10,000 attending the Evergreen State College. Earlier this year, having made payments under the terms offered by various lenders and consolidators since graduation, I still owed more money than the day I received my bachelor's degree. Stop it right there. Right there. Stop it. Stop. This clown borrowed $10,000 2 decades ago. And he didn't pay off any of the principal. I mean, have you worked? Clearly you have. Someone's actually paying you to write these articles, which is just stunning in and of itself.
Talk about a bombshell.
You borrowed you are so pathetic that you borrowed $10,000 2 decades ago. And you have such little shame in admitting that you have not paid off $1 of principal in 2 decades, of course, blaming lenders and consolidators instead of just taking out a calculator for 2 seconds and saying, how do I pay off $10,000? In 20 years, you haven't paid off $1. You are a leech of the American taxpayer with a college degree. And now you're asking every other worker, every other taxpayer, every blue-collar person who's grinding this morning to pay off your $10,000 loan, and you have no shame. You actually write an article admitting all this. Matt Driscoll adds here in the Star, today my outstanding balance is $0. Biden did it. He made my student loan debt disappear. Well, no, he didn't do anything. Joe Biden, the only thing Joe Biden did is defy the Supreme Court, which we used to call, and guys like Matt Driscoll used to call potential, they would consider that a threat to democracy. Now they celebrate it. He made my student loan debt, he writes, disappear without celebration or fanfare. Really? It's all this guy talks about, is how he's defying the Supreme Court to try to buy votes of Gen Zers, or in this case, this guy's like a Gen Xer. He's a borderline boomer. He's been out of college for 2 decades. He hasn't paid off his $10,000 loan in 2 decades. And he's writing about it as if we all should be celebrating the schmuck. Oh, my goodness. He made my student loan debt disappear without celebration or fanfare beyond a few vague emails and a surprise $40 kickback. Almost like it was orchestrated in the shadows. Something better left unspoken for fear of jinxing it. No wonder this guy couldn't make money to pay back his $10,000 debt when he writes stuff like this. I mean, holy smokes. Critics of the president's efforts to forgive millions in student loan debt will call it a blatant abuse of power. No, it is a blatant abuse of power. Congress never signed off on this. The Supreme Court said you can't do it. It is. It's not calling it a blatant abuse of power. It is a blatant abuse of power. And a desperate campaign ploy designed to buy votes ahead of November's election. That's the first accurate thing you've said here in this piece. He adds here, to suggest that political realities haven't factored into the Biden administration's decisions and timing would be daft. Still, I'm not complaining or apologizing. Clearly, why would you do that? Why would you why would you look in the mirror for 7 seconds and realize how insane this whole story is? I mean, no self-awareness by this guy whatsoever. Still, I'm not complaining or apologizing, writes Matt Driscoll, and neither should anyone who's been tossed a surprised student loan lifeline. As things stand, Biden's complicated legacy now includes providing tangible debt relief to a select but significant number of Americans. Yes, tangible debt relief to a select but significant number of Americans. It's historic, he writes, unprecedented, and continues to be extremely divisive. Geez, I can't imagine why. Could you? He says, for a generation of college students exploited by the commodification of higher education and an unchecked system. Dude, you had 10 grand in loans you didn't pay off in 20 years. Meanwhile, it has the potential to be monumental, unshackling hardworking Americans. Trust me, bro, you ain't hardworking.
To do what?
Yeah. From a senseless weight that's done nothing but hold them back. And as far as alleged campaign gimmicks go, that's not bad. I mean, these are the kind of people that your tax dollars are bailing out. This piece, like, Donald Trump should just read this piece on the debate stage on Thursday night by Matt Driscoll. That's in the Kansas City Star. That's what he should do. He should read this piece. He'll win 49 states. He might not win California, but he'll win 49 states. And then what Donald Trump should do is, after he reads this piece, look the American people dead in the eye, stare right into the camera, and say to the American people, say to you and I, is a guy like Matt Driscoll worth your McDonald's money?
I'm not worth your McDonald's money.
Come on! Come on! And then I'll yell at the TV, come on! And then Donald Trump can ask, is Matt Driscoll worth your Red Lobster money?
I'm not worth your Red Lobster money.
And then I'll yell at the TV, oh, Jesus! And then Donald Trump will landslide his way to an electoral college victory we have not seen since 1984.
And then Joe Biden will yell,
you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, and you ain't black.
That's exactly right. That'll be his response.